This is part 2 of a demonstration of how you can connect Tableau to Qualtrics data, where Qualtrics has been used to collect to collect answers from survey questions authored in Qualtrics. In the previous video, we created this visualization here where we looked at the NPS scores, whether customers and employees were promoters or detractors. What I'm going to do in this session is I'm going to look a little closer at the data source and look at more complicated responses, like, for example, the responses you see here where questions have multiple answers and you can select more than one response. Each of these selections is going to create a separate row in Tableau that you can analyze, where the row games for this particular response will be set to true, and the row for lighting in this response, because I haven't clicked it, will be set to false. So just going back, recapping a little bit, by double-clicking on our data source here, we can reopen it, reconnect using the API and the key back to the data source. You can see the columns that have been imported, and we can even go back and look at the actual data, look at the actual definitions from Qualtrics of what we've pulled in. And you'll recall that we transposed or pivoted these questions, question 3 and question 4, which are of course these questions here. This is question 4, and they're pivoted, so that means that we're no longer going to get a single row for this question. We're going to get multiple rows, and for each row, as I said earlier, you'll get a true or false whether games was selected, whether lighting was selected, whether electrical was selected. Let's have a look what that actually looks like in the data. So I'll go back to the sheets. Let's create a brand new sheet. When you pivot, you actually create these particular dimensions. Question description, which contains the text that was shown to the respondent, which are least important, which are most important. A question ID, which is actually the answer ID, so whether they in question 4 had selected carpets or whether in question 3 they'd selected computers. And we also have the textual answer, which is that true or false, whether they selected carpets. If they did, then true would be set to 1. If they didn't, then false would be set to 1. Let's go ahead and put those response IDs in here. So this is actually counting the number of responses where people had checked on carpets in question 4. There were 6 of them, of which 20 and 22 that didn't select carpets on question 4. Now there is something interesting here. You might recall that earlier we were using the response ID because we wanted to do a unique count. Again, a little bit complicated, but we can now, because we've used the pivot, we can actually use the number of records quite happily, because the number of records is actually the same as the distinct count of the number of response IDs. And that's just something that just drops out of the hat when you're using the pivot. Okay, well, what do we want to do? What I'd actually like to do is build out a tree map that shows with a very large block the things that customers find very important and the things that customers didn't find very important. So I'd like to do that in a tree map, and I'd like the size of, I'm only interested in this column here where they've actually selected something. I'm not interested in analyzing what they didn't select. So that's the first thing I'm going to do, is I'm going to pick that textual answer, put that on a filter panel, and I'm going to filter out all the false responses. So now we just have the trues left. And in fact, that textual answer, I don't even need that in there. I don't need the word true up there. This is good. And the next thing I want to do is I actually want to consolidate carpets with carpets and question 4 and question 3 and separate out question 3 from question 4. So the way to do that is through this question ID, like Q4 carpets. I want to parse out Q4 and parse out the word electrical and the word food. Not too hard. I'll show you how to do it. In essence, we create a we create a calculated field out of question ID. So I'm going to take the regular question ID, but I'm also going to just take the left characters. As you can see, there's an example here. I'm going to take the left 4 characters, no, the left 2 characters from this question ID. All right, and I'm not going to call that calculation 1. I will call that the question number. Question number. I'll go ahead and put that on the filter here, and I can see it's nicely parsed out question 3 and question 4. So that's good. The next one I want to do is I want to now parse out gift cards and hair products. That's again based on question ID. I will create another calculated field. This time the formula is slightly more complicated. I'm using a regular expression, and there's lots of reading you can do on regular expressions, but I'll just briefly explain this regular expression to you. The regular expression will actually extract from question ID, from this text here. It'll pull out and analyze it first, but it'll analyze it and find the letter Q, 0s to 9, and spaces and open parentheses. It will look for those, which you can see are the parentheses there. So Q4 space open parentheses will match this little expression, because I've said any of those characters within those brackets, the plus means 1 or more, so 1 or more of these characters and it'll match. So that's just going to match with Q3 open parentheses, Q4 space open parentheses, Q4 space open parentheses. And then this parenthesized expression here says I want to match then and extract anything that has letters A to Z from capitals to lowercase and spaces. Anything that's A to Z with spaces, 1 or more characters, I will want to match that. So it's going to parse that packaging, but it'll stop on the parentheses because there is no parentheses within this group here. I haven't included parentheses. So reasonably complicated and difficult for some, but you kind of get used to these regular expressions, and they are very, very powerful. Let's have a look to see if that actually pulls out the, shall we call that the department, correctly. And I'll put that department on my filter panel on the right, and that has actually pulled out the wording beautifully there. All right, so I'm going to replace question ID, this column, with my department that I've just created. So I'll drop that on top of question ID, and now it's nicely separated out. Okay, I can also, why not, use the question number and put that in front. So we've got question 3, which services are most important to you? And then out of all of these, it looks like sort by here. Yeah, sorting isn't quite working because I've got 2 columns in here. But yeah, it looks like food was most important. Okay, now as I was saying, I would like to show this a little bit more visually. And this graph here, a tree map, that type of graph is much better at showing this kind of thing. And doesn't that look great? So you've got question 3 over here. Most important thing was food. That's got a really dark coloring. It's the biggest box. And for question 4, what was least important, it was carpets and electrical. I've got too many labels going on here. So here are the labels, 3 labels. I really only want this department, you know, whether it's electrical, computers, or food. So I'm going to get rid and just drag away these other ones. What I would like to do, though, is I'd like to put something along the left and separate this stuff out. So department, for example, I'll just double click on it. No, I won't undo that. I'll put department here on rows so that no thank you, don't want that either. That's not looking very good at all. Yes, I don't want department. I don't want department. What I want is I want this, the first question was whether they were an employee or not. So I'm going to go and put that on the left-hand side here, whether they're employees or customers. And you know what? I'm going to rename this group because Q1 is not the best name for it. I think Q1 segment because it's a segment of my customer base, you know, whether they're customers or employees, or whether they're both customer and employees. That would be the best name, but it'll do. All right. I also would like for it to take up all this space, because what this is actually saying is that people didn't respond, the people that were customers and employees didn't respond to everything. So we got most responses from employees. They picked up everything, or almost every section, every department. So I want to open this up and scale it out so it always uses 100% of the room that's there. So I'll use size. That's the size is based by the number of responses, the distinct number of responses. And what I'll do is I'll say, actually what I'll do is I'll just replace it with the number of records, because I know that that will save a complication down the track. And I will do a distinct, so not a distinct count, just a count of the records, like that. And then the size, I will say, do a quick calculation and say it should be a percentage of a total. So consider the whole thing to be 100%. What is the whole thing? Well, that would be across pulled down the wrong one. That would be across the table, not down the table. And now we're using up 100% of that space. But I can already see that we're getting a problem here. So let's have a look. Now this looks about right. Customers gave most feedback on food, computers, and electrical, but we haven't split this out yet into the two question types. Remember that we had two question types? And if we put the question number back on here, we had question 3 and question 4. Let's get the description or the English language that was shown to those users. Which services are most important to you? Question 3. Customers said food and computers and carpets were most important. Employees said electrical and hair products were most important. Now this is beginning to look right. When it came to least important, customers said electrical and plants were least important. All right, look, I think that is actually quite a decent representation. Let's go ahead and work with this and put this now in Tableau. We create dashboards, and I want to put this on a dashboard so that I might be able to drill down and investigate a little further. And on that dashboard, I've got these two sheets, right? Sheet 1, which was the NPS analysis, and sheet 2, which is the tree map of departments. On that dashboard, I want to put the NPS at the top and then the tree maps underneath it, and I want to be able to drill down so that when I click on, for example, this group of detractors or this group of passives, that I get details. I see the details here below. Way to do that, as a shortcut here, I can say use as filter. As soon as I click that, I can filter down at the bottom. So all of these detractors that are employees, what those detractors who didn't like our company, what they used most and liked most was electrical and food, so don't mess with those, and what they didn't like was carpets and computers. Whereas the employees that were reasonably happy, well, it is all a very similar story. If we look at all the detractors like this, across our customers and people that work here and people that buy from us and people that work here and buy from us, you get another kind of split. All right, I think that will probably do. The last thing that is worth just showing you is that what is the underlying data that sits under these things. You can always right-click in Tableau and say View Data. And down here you get the underlying data. So this is these are the actual rows and columns of data that Qualtrics produced to produce that employee electrical block. So which services are most important to you? As far as employers are concerned, it was electrical. And then you can see here that the question that was asked, which services are most important to you? It was the answer electrical, and we'll find true in the textual answer here because we filtered down to just truths and no falses. All right, look, I hope you found that a valuable session. As I said, my name is Frank van Praag from Qualtrics in Canberra, and I thank you for your attention.